Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chinyere. It's been a while guys, but anyways, we're back here again, and today I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of being a medical radiographer. I know that a lot of you have been watching my videos lately, especially because of the one that I posted where I was in the hospital, a day in my life. And I think that that video kind of dragged a lot of medical radiographers towards my channel. Today, I just wanted to talk about this particular topic because somebody recently asked me a question which kind of just left a wake-up call in my heart, and I was like, it'll be nice for me to make this video for anybody who might just be interested in this particular profession for themselves. So if this is the kind of content that you like to watch, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and also leave a comment down below, as I will be excited to read from every one of you guys in the comment section. So the question basically that was left on my channel was, before you got into the rad tech program, were you 100% sure you wanted to be a rad tech? So I think the person is in America because that's what they call it. In this part of the world, we call it medical radiography. Yeah, and that's exactly what it was called when I was back in Nigeria. So I studied medical radiography in Nigeria, and it was a 5-year course. Originally, that was not the course that I wanted to study. I probably wanted to study pharmacy, or I was in fact confused by the time I was leaving secondary school, because first of all, I didn't have the proper guidance through secondary school to choose a course for myself. There wasn't exactly a proper structure put in place to allow students to explore their abilities in order to know what exactly they should eventually get to study when they get to university. Unfortunately for me, I was in that class of people who graduated from secondary school, and I was in the confusion of what exactly will I study when I get to the university. So I went on from applying for home economics into, I think I applied for geology, pharmacy, and a couple of other courses that did not have any business to do with medical radiography. Basically, after 3 years of trying to write JAMB over and over again, JAMB was jamming me in Nigeria. I woke up one day and my dad was like, a friend of his has some supplementary forms for a course called medical radiography. Now, taking me back to some time, like a year before, I had suffered some palpitations because I was crushing on a particular boy, and my mom took me to the hospital because she was really worried, thinking that I had some heart condition of some sort. So of course I knew what exactly was wrong with me. So I went to the hospital, got in there, I met a tech, and he asked me to take off my top. I think I was like 17 years old at the time. So he asked me to take off my top, and of course I still had like really tiny perky boobs then. And he was like, oh, take off your top, I'll need to place some electrodes on your chest so that he could do an ECG. But of course I didn't know what all of that was about. Anyways, basically, we started to do the ECG. Of course, I was so embarrassed. Thankfully, my mom was there with me. We finished the process and all the procedure, and we eventually went home. Of course, I started doing some research to find out what exactly he was, what his profession was, because I saw like medical radiographer, and then I started doing some research into it. So once my dad had mentioned it again, it was like, okay, let me just jump on this opportunity. By the time I got into my first year, second year, I wasn't interested in medical radiography because it was a lot of physics and a lot of maths. I mean, there was anatomy, there was a lot of biology and all the other science stuff, but I was flopping a lot in the maths and physics, especially in the maths section of things, because I wasn't too good in maths. But physics was kind of like not so new to me because I'd done it. I loved physics in secondary school. Eventually though, I got into my third year, and then we started to do like the hospital practice part of medical radiography, and all of a sudden somehow I started to develop some love for it. I've spoken to a lot of medical radiographers through my years of practice, and a number of times a lot of them did not want to study radiography at first, or they did not even know what radiography was about. They just came across it because in the first place they wanted to be in the hospital. So yeah, it just depends on what exactly you want for yourself. Just know that there's there's a bit of maths, a bit of physics involved, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of equipment eventually when you get into the hospital part of practice. So about the pros and cons of being a medical radiographer, the very first one for me will be that it's been my ticket to the world. I will say that ever since I graduated from school, medical radiography has been that thing that has given me a chance to travel around the world. for different reasons. So when I first moved to Ireland, I remember that there were a couple of times that I would go through the airport immigration border, you know, with my Nigerian passport back then. And lots of times when you come across the immigration patrol guys, the first thing they will ask you is like, okay, so what's your address? And then they go on to see like what exactly you do for a living, which kind of gives them an idea that you're not just here living and depending. But a lot of times with my medical radiography profession, it kind of just gave me an edge anytime I walk through the airport. And yeah, I'll just say that it's been that one thing that has given me a lot of boost, because I've lived in like 3 countries now, and I've worked and practiced in those 3 countries without any problem at all as a medical radiographer. Because you know that for some people, when you study some courses, you go to some countries and it's almost like your life is taken back like 10 years away, because you have practiced or you have studied something that didn't exactly have to do with the economy. So I'll say that radiography is one thing that has given me an edge, because all you need to do first of all is just like register into most countries professional boards, and once you're done with that, as long as you can speak their language, it kind of just allows you to go straight into their workforce and start earning a living for yourself. There is a high demand for medical radiographers in most countries around the world, and most of the time job institutions need medical radiographers more than they think. I'll be giving instances here. So by the time I was graduating from the university, I was in the Faculty of Health Science and Technology, the Allied Health Professionals Department. So in that particular faculty, we had the medical rehabilitation students, also known as the physiotherapists, the nurses, and the med lab scientists. So by the time I was leaving the university, most of my classmates had permitted the hospital scene with permanent jobs. They were already like settled in hospitals compared to the other departments. And I remember when I used to attend classes then, especially my 3rd year, when I was kind of confused if I actually wanted to remain in radiography, a particular classmate of mine, shout out to you, Neka, kept on encouraging me. She was like, she should just stay here. By the time we graduate from school, we're not going to look for jobs. I just didn't understand it until when, of course, I had finished with the course and graduated from school, and the very next month I was working in the hospital with a full-time internship, well-paying job, you know. And then by the time I moved into Ireland, of course, I was jobless for a few months, of about 7 to 8 months. And one day I walked into a hospital like a jolly good fellow, just tired of staying at home after a couple of applications had gone down and I'd been turned down because of my what was the word? So I was turned down because of my status, my joint spouse status at the time, my resident status at the time, because it kind of limited me from working in any institution at all in the country. I was more like expected to depend on my spouse with the visa that I came into the country with. So one day I walked into a hospital and it was more like, I want to come and volunteer my services free of charge, you know, just give me a job as a radiographer and I'll be happy to just wake up every day and come out. And the manager was like, no, we can't do that, you're a professional and you don't need any extra training. From what we can see with your CV here, even though you're coming from Nigeria, you don't have to write any exams, it's just coming straight and you get a job. And of course, the very last one will be my experience here in the UK so far. Of course, I've gotten some extra qualifications since the year that I was in Ireland. And when I came to the UK, I noticed that the job that I was trying to get into was kind of short-changing me, or is it short-pricing me? I don't even know what word to use, but they were underpricing me basically. And I remember after the job was offered to me, or I felt I was underpriced, because of course I'd gained some extra qualification. So basically, after I'd gotten the employment offer, I called the manager and I was like, is there any way we can negotiate this salary? Which at the time when I was negotiating my salary, my husband was kind of like furious at me, like, you haven't even worked here and you're trying to negotiate the salary. Because for him as a doctor, I think doctors have a standard price, and I don't think that negotiating is something that doctors do. So it was kind of strange to my husband to see me trying to negotiate my job offer at the time. But eventually it was considered, and yeah, So the very next one is the fact that you get to work with high-tech machines. You know, it's really nice, especially when you walk in like a pediatric department and children come around and you're just moving around all these machines. Sometimes you don't even have to touch anything. You're just pressing a button and machines are moving around. It can look very, you know, sophisticated with you as a young lady to just be working in a room and, you know, you're moving all those machines around and people are looking at you like, are you actually going to use this thing on me at this time? But yeah, that's just something that I have enjoyed too so far. Last but not the least point will be that radiography is a highly rewarding profession, and this is based on the fact that you are not just working with highly sophisticated machines on a day-to-day basis. You're actually having interactions with real-life human beings. And I mean, every day people walk into your office with sicknesses or diseases that they have no clue about what is going on in their bodies. You pass them through a machine, pass them through some form of ionizing radiation or non-ionizing radiation, and all of a sudden you're able to diagnose whatever is wrong with them. It gives a sense of satisfaction to just know that, okay, somebody walks into my office and doesn't know what is wrong with them, but I could just pass some, you know, invisible thing through their bodies and all of a sudden I can actually make out what exactly is wrong with them. I mean, there's some professions in the hospital that you don't exactly get to have interactions with patients, where you're just dispensing stuff or you are just working with machines. For me, on a day-to-day basis, interacting with my patients gives me the high point of my day. So it's really exciting for me to walk into the office and actually get to talk to patients to find out what exactly is going with them and how exactly they are faring through their treatments in the hospital. And at the end of the day, by the time they are leaving the hospitals, most of the time they come back to you to say, thank you so much for the services you rendered to me. I can now walk with my 2 feet leaving this hospital. So it's very rewarding. And on that note, we will be moving on to the cons of medical radiography. So moving on to the cons, I'm going to get real with you guys here because I'm not just here to sugarcoat stuff for you if you want to get into this profession. The very first one will be some days will be very physically intense for you as a radiographer. On those days, you will find it hard, you will struggle to be cheerful, especially when you have to work in A&E or in the theater. Depending on the hospital, you could get to stand for long hours. It all depends. For me, when I first came from Nigeria, I'd come from a background where we had porters doing all the lifting of patients, manual handling stuff. So I really did not pay attention when I had my first manual handling class in Ireland, because I did not understand the fact that I would have to be lifting patients myself in this particular hospital. So after a series of years and months of, you know, helping patients lift them up, I realized that I had sustained injuries in my shoulder, and I also sustained injuries because of the long hours that I was standing in theater around my calcaneum. I actually thought that I had torn a ligament. I basically had to submit myself for an MRI examination. Thankfully, it was clear. But I've also had a colleague of mine in mammography who has sustained carpal tunnel syndrome because of the constant movement that the hand or the wrist gets to do when you're trying to lift the breast onto the detector in mammography. So it's just something that you should be aware of. I don't know if this is a con, but there is no title attached to radiographers, and I know that in most hospitals, at least where I come from, it's a thing to have titles attached to your name, you know, like you're a doctor, or when someone comes into the hospital, are you a nurse? So most of the time I've realized that when people come to the hospital, they're confused about what to call radiographers. Like, are you a nurse or are you a sister? Like, what exactly is your title about? Because I need to attach something to your name. So I don't know if this is a con, but of course for some people it matters a lot. And yeah, it can get very monotonous. And I say that because most of the time when you're coming into a hospital every day doing the same thing, I mean, it could get very boring because you're just doing the same thing over and over again. For me, I think back in Nigeria, what I noticed is that we work more like jack of all trades, master of none. So if you're working in the hospital, you're basically going to go around with rotating around all of the modalities that they have available in the hospital. But what I've noticed here is most of the time, you're probably limited to like 1, maximum like 3 modalities to work with. So most people here like to just specialize in that one particular thing that they are working on and stick to it, which I kind of feel like after a while it could get monotonous. So if you're that kind of person that likes to be adventurous around your workplace. You might just find out that after a while it gets very boring. You're going to work doing the same thing over and over again. But of course, with the different cases that you get to attend to every day, it just kind of spruce up or add some extra touch to the work that you get to do whenever you walk into your office. So it could be 50-50 of both things. The very last one will be that there is a high chance of exposure to radiation. There is a risk of radiographers exposing themselves to radiation. Let's not sugarcoat it. Several times as a radiographer, I've been very cautious not to fry my eggs. I remember in the early days of practice for me, I'd probably done some things that were not exactly ethical as a radiographer, exposing patients in a room without radiation protection of any sort, or maybe just trying to help a pediatric patient to be held down, you know, and I just go there without any form of lead protection, because sometimes you're just trying to do things very quickly without thinking about protecting yourself. And I remember there was this particular day after I graduated from school, I went back to my university to get my results, and I came across this young lady who was crying. She was in an office just sitting right beside me, and she was crying. Her parents were in an office talking to one of our lecturers, and I turned to her, I was like, are you okay? You know, like back then I'd just moved to Ireland, and then I came back to Nigeria for the first time to get some results and some other school stuff. And I was like, are you okay? And she was like, oh, that her parents are trying to discourage her and pull her out from radiography because they feel like she's going to be sterile. And it was quite amazing to hear her say that, but it's just something that goes on through the minds of a lot of people, even though we don't exactly talk about it. I've had a colleague who, I mean, he had twins back to back. I wasn't too sure if it was attributed to the radiation that he might have accumulated over the years in his system, because he had like twins the first pregnancy, the second pregnancy his wife had twins again. There was also another colleague of mine, rest his soul, who died from leukemia back in the day. He was really young, I mean, had just started working after school, but all of a sudden he just developed leukemia, and we're not sure if it was like something that he had picked up from exposure to radiation. I mean, it's just something that could happen, especially in places where the regulations are not exactly checked. So yeah, it's just something that I have had in my mind over the years, and yeah, it's probably one of the cons that a lot of us don't exactly talk about. So if you are a medical radiographer and you have similar stories to share with mine on how you got into the profession, or you have any other extra thing to add to the pros and cons that I have shared today on this video, please do leave a comment in the comment section down below, as I will be very excited to read from every one of you. And if you are not and you just enjoy this conversation, of course I will still be happy to see you in the comment section. Until I see you guys in my next video, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.